Pei Yuan traveled through, into the world of the Black Robe Inspection Team, becoming a mentally ill person and a little white mouse at the experimental base under the water group. At the front, there was a lamplighter who was eyeing fiercely, and at the back, there was the disdain of the race storm queen. He expressed some panic. Fortunately, at a critical moment, he likes to mention the heavenly play system. As long as he obtains the play value, he can become the doomsday of the human catastrophe. Firstly, he obtained the destructive ray when Pei Yuan stood in front of the Chinese people, spraying hot eyes. Motherland roars. What kind of Superman are you? Pei Yuan grinned cruelly and said, I specialize in killing Superman. When Pei Yuan stood in front of Ba and turned his fists. Pei Yuan grinned and said, what kind of bully are you? I'm your dad. Spitting blood extinguishes the star, the hot gaze melts everything, dragging the planet with bare hands, and the physical body jumps between the stars. When Pei Yuan did all of this. I can't say you may not believe it, I was still a lunatic back then. Keywords of the novel. Meiman. Starting from the Black Robe to become the day of ultimate destruction without a pop-up window, Meiman. Starting from the Black Robe to become the day of ultimate destruction. Download complete text, Meiman. Starting from the Black Robe to become the day of ultimate destruction. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Loading template, Doomsday. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1, Loading template, Doomsday. His heartbeat has fallen below the limit, Master Carlton. Give him adrenaline. Mentor, it doesn't work. Then throw it back to the room, Legrand. Replace it with another one, reduce the compound dosage by 5%. Pennsylvania, center of the wise jungle. This is a secret mental hospital located in a remote suburb of the city, a subsidiary of a global health institution. In a narrow house with only a toilet and sink, an Asian young man sat on a single bed with bare feet and a white long-sleeved shirt, somewhat wooden. I've seen a ghost. It's amazing that this outrageous thing like time travel can really happen to me. The Asian youth looked around with eerie eyes, then lowered his head to look at his somewhat unfamiliar body, somewhat surprised and somewhat bewildered. However, the memory that came out of his mind clearly told Pei Yuan that he had indeed passed through the man with the same name as himself. The only difference is that this guy is mentally ill, and as his condition worsened, he was transferred to this mental hospital called the Wise Jungle Center. So is this guy a mental illness? And this Sage Jungle Center sounds a bit familiar to me, as if I've seen it in some Walter group. Wait, Walter group. As soon as this vocabulary subconsciously appeared in my mind, a strange and chaotic memory emerged from my mind. Pei Yuan rubbed his head and sorted out the memories in his mind, quickly sorting everything out. Did I travel through this, or did I wear it to the world of the black-robed sentinels, and even to a white mouse of an experimental drug in the water group? Recalling everything in his mind, Pei Yuan felt a bit unbelievable. Pei Yuan is no stranger to the water group. In the world of the Black Robe Sentinels, the water group has been committed to researching compounds that can produce superhumans, resulting in the creation of superhero groups with diverse abilities, the Super 7. Among them, the Chinese people have the strongest combat power. The current situation is not satisfied, and the water group has been committed to researching and improving the production of compound number 5, which is superhuman, in an attempt to solve the instability problem of injection into adults. If there is a pharmaceutical research institute, then naturally there are mice. A subsidiary of the water group, the Wise Jungle Center Psychiatric Hospital, was secretly developed into a research facility, and those who transferred to the hospital, without a father or mother, became their perfect guinea pigs. Obviously, it is regrettable that Pei Yuan is also one of them, and his predecessor, as the subject of this experiment, unfortunately went underground. Thinking of these things, Pei Yuan's whole body became completely uncomfortable. Being at the experimental base of the water group, the level of danger here was directly increased. Pei Yuan had already witnessed the instability of Compound 5 through fragmented memories in his predecessor's mind, and 90% of mental illnesses were directly caused by the effects of Compound 5, resulting in death. The remaining 10% also have various problems due to the side effects. Some have rough faces, some have their heads turned into speakers, some have turned into a puddle of water, some have eggs that are as hot as a soldering iron. Compound 5 is even more blind than the blind box, and the path to becoming a superhuman is not so smooth. The appearance of an ordinary superhuman would have piles of corpses under his feet. But escape recalling the memories in his mind, Pei Yuan felt an endless sense of despair. In front of him, there is a prison cell like a copper wall and iron wall, and the hospital has a team of former Super 7 lighters to control emergencies and eliminate evidence, as well as layers of defense. How can he escape from heaven, a mental illness without any superpowers, and how can he leave this prison? He has no choice but to leave this wall and this iron gate. Can we finally have a chance to have a second chance and stay here until we become a stiff little mouse in the hands of those people? Pei Yuan sat dumbfounded on the roomer, his eyes fixed on the wall with only a palm-sized window, his expression dazed. Wait, it seems that some strange things have mixed in. It's over, have you really become mentally ill? Pei Yuan blinked as he looked at a sudden square frame on the wall in front of him. Discovering that the semi-transparent frame was still there, he decided to close his eyes, but this thing moved with his own eyes, as if engraved on the retina. The semi-transparent frame emits a gentle light, and there seems to be text on it. A large number of movies, novels, and anime with various settings flashed through Pei Yuan's mind. He was stunned and stared intently, wanting to read the text on the frame clearly. Suddenly, those blurry information appeared silently in his retina. Ding dong. Exploring pressure, the system is on its way. The Zhu Play system is currently loading successful, role-playing is currently being transmitted. As the progress bar appeared on the screen, Pei Yuan felt the surrounding environment suddenly darken. A moment of confusion suddenly appeared in an unknown world, as if in a dream. This world has no light, no sound, only a dead and empty darkness. Pei Yuan felt as if he had been pulled into an endless deep sea without light, or perhaps an empty and lifeless universe. Then he saw an unknown existence imprisoned here. It has a tall and sturdy giant body of over 3 meters, with strong muscle fibers exposed like molten iron, and a gray-white hard exoskeleton covering almost the entire body. And from the tip of the fist to the back, rows of terrifying thorns protrude. Just take a glance and you will feel that this is the most powerful killing machine from ancient times to the present day, the least worthy thing in the world, like a synonym for destruction. So am I playing Doomsday? The end of all things, the dusk of the gods, the destruction day of the mortal gods, Superman. Pei Yuan's gaze paused, his heart pounding like a drumbeat echoing in this unknown space. Suddenly, the unknown existence opened its eyes, its gaze empty as if it could absorb everything, trembling with the heavens and gods. At the next moment, the prompt sound of the system loading completed, and Pei Yuan's consciousness was pulled back to reality, which was still a cramped room. But at this moment, Pei Yuan's mentality has flipped. As long as he has a little ability to destroy the day, can this broken mental hospital still trap him? Unable to wait, he opened the panel directly and a semi-transparent information box appeared in his line of sight. Doomsday template loaded successfully. Current role model. Doomsday. Template unlocking progress. 0%. Ability. When the template progress reaches 5%, it can be unlocked. Play value. 0. It is indeed the day of destruction. Pei Yuan, who saw the panel information, felt relieved. However, when he saw that the ability play value was empty, he couldn't help but frown. The ability obviously needs to be unlocked through the play value to reach the next stage of unlocking, but how does this play value come from? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Can sun exposure make you strong? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Can sun exposure make you strong? After loading the target, Pei Yuan began to think about how to play the role of Doomsday. Acting, as the name suggests, is naturally a form of action, language, and other forms of acting, but increasing the value of acting points. The most significant aspect of Doomsday is its natural destruction. It's just that the scenes of Doomsday often destroy the sky and earth, killing countless powerful people. Now, with limited abilities, he can't even achieve them. Just as Pei Yuan was pondering how to break through the game and increase his playing value, a hint suddenly sounded in his mind. Play value +1. Pei Yuan was stunned for a moment, and instinctively opened the system panel. At this moment, the number in the value column had changed, becoming a solitary 1. Although this is a small step in numbers, it is a big step in history. Unfortunately. However, there was no growth afterwards, and Pei Yuan worked on it for a long time without knowing how this role value came about. He couldn't help but carefully recall his previous actions, thinking that before the increase in his acting value, he seemed to shake his wrist. Thinking of these, he immediately sat in his previous position, then shook his wrist as usual, and draped it over the bedside, while paying attention to his arms. In a few minutes, the prompt sound of adding 1 to the play value came again. Pei Yuan lowered his head and looked at the beam of sunlight shining on the back of his hand outside the narrow window. His gaze paused slightly, and after a moment of contemplation, he understood. So, by exposing oneself to sunlight, one can obtain the role value. Similar to Doomsday Superman absorbing stellar energy. Transformed it into this form. In the following tests, Pei Yuan verified this idea. So the whole body squeezed into the narrow sunlight, absorbing its energy to play a role. Because he wanted to shine more sunlight, Pei Yuan stretched his hands over his head, palms pressed open, and stood straight. Try to immerse your entire body in the sunlight as much as possible, so that your posture appears as strange as possible. Play value +2. Current play value 13. At this moment, Pei Yuan had no time to attend to it. Seeing the completely different number changes on the panel, he was immediately delighted. After fully immersing himself in the sunshine, his current performance efficiency has indeed improved. So he stood up straight and persisted in making stiff movements. Play value +2. Play value +1. Play value +2. Listening to the constant reminders from the system, although the improvement in the performance progress was also so small, Pei Yuan was still filled with excitement. The time has increased by several tens of points in this moment. According to this progress, there should be enough time. When it reaches 5%, the corresponding superpowers will be unlocked. Thinking of the vast world outside, Pei Yuan became more and more eager to imitate. Hee, Boar, what are you doing with that yellow-skinned monkey? It looks so funny. Look at that action, it doesn't look like a duck with a straight neck, In the surveillance room, a man wearing a security uniform took a picture of the white man next to him, gesturing with a mocking expression to look at the surveillance footage. Yet, which superhuman is he imitating? Boar's face hesitated as he watched the Asian man's movements in the surveillance footage. Hi, this yellow-skinned monkey is lucky and hasn't died yet. When he wakes up, he starts tossing around and imitating some superhuman. It's unlikely he's imitating the lamplighter, right? Let's just forget about that monster. That monster doesn't look so stupid. Yate laughed as he watched Pei Yuan's movements in the surveillance footage. Boar hissed and said, Art, you're not going to die. Don't talk nonsense, the lamplighter is still here. What are you afraid of? That monster just went to the cafeteria, Yate said nonchalantly. Boar knew that Yate had been outdone by a chubby superhuman, and since then he hates superhumans and speaks without any cover. Fearing that he might say something amazing, Boar quickly changed the topic and said, This guy wasn't like this before, isn't this a bit abnormal? Before he could finish speaking, he saw Yate looking at him with an extremely special gaze, which left Boar stunned and unsure of what he had said wrong. Or, have you been working for too long? You've been brained by those poor fools, and you've forgotten where this is. This is a mental hospital. That guy is mentally ill. He's abnormal, right? Oh, I'm really dizzy. Upon hearing Yates' laughter and scolding, Bohr realized how ridiculous his thoughts were, suspecting that a mental illness was abnormal. Do we still need to suspect a mental illness? Surprisingly, I suspect that a mental illness is abnormal. It's normal if a mental illness is abnormal. Alright, take a look at the monitor. I should prepare lunch for those poor guys. Looking at Pole, who was patting his head in frustration, Yates smiled and shrugged as he walked out. Pei Yuan in the room is still tirelessly persevering in his movements, and positions that are exposed to more sunlight are also given more role-playing value accordingly. When Pei Yuan insisted on this action, the progress of the role conversion also increased to 0.8%. And the performance value improved by each irradiation can almost maintain at the level of 2, even appearing at 3 several times. The wholehearted irradiation and stiff body movements also consumed a lot of physical energy, not to mention the injuries that had occurred before. Pei Yuan stopped his stiff movements, wiped the sweat off his forehead, and then sat by the bed against the wall to rest. At this moment, a dark figure appeared at the door, and with a clang, the sturdy prison door was opened. When Pei Yuan looked over and saw that it was a strong white man wearing a security uniform, he casually threw a bread in. The bread bounced on the ground, rolled a few times, and then turned into a black piece. Looking at the unsightly food, Pei Yuan couldn't help but feel angry in his eyes, but his body still sat motionless on the bed. Hi, poor yellow-skinned monkey, today is your lucky day. God bless you, the bread I gave you is not good to eat yet. Looking at the motionless Asian youth in the room, Yet sneered at the corners of his mouth and then kicked the bread in front of him. As the white man closed the door and walked away, Pei Yuan picked up the dusty bread and slowly wiped away the dust, while his eyes flickered with cold light. This strong white man knows that the security guard here, Yate, is an ordinary person without superpowers. After entering a mental hospital, he enjoys regularly bullying patients. Of course, it's bullying ordinary patients who don't have superpowers yet, and those who have superpowers are not afraid, let alone mental illnesses with superpowers. As for the purpose, listening to the staff's conversation is a superhuman trauma. I dare not deal with superhumans and can only bully them for pleasure. In the future, when someone becomes a superhuman due to mental illness, they will publicly claim to have worked with superhumans. Previously, Pei Yuan couldn't help but be bullied by this guy. Pei Yuan swore that when he went out, he would have the opportunity to stuff this bread into that guy's chrysanthemum. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Unlocking Destruction Rays. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3, Unlocking Destruction Rays. Yate, you shouldn't have entered the room. That's the permission of the lamplighter. In case that guy awakens his superpowers. In the monitoring room, Bohr, who had just passed through the surveillance and could clearly see Yat's behavior, couldn't help but issue a reminder after Yat returned. Huh, Bohr, what kind of hell joke are you talking about? Look at which of the remaining superhuman monsters here isn't left behind after a pile of garbage has died. This guy can become a superhuman. Shit, at most he's just a lucky guy. Yate had a sarcastic expression on his face and didn't take Bohr's suggestion seriously. He has played with so many guys and opened so many prison doors, doesn't he know which one has superpowers? Even if that yellow-skinned monkey had the ability, the guy who would pull his pants as soon as he entered the laboratory would dare to take action against him. Seeing Yate's expression, Bohr also knew that talking too much was useless, so he stopped continuing. Yate lazily sat back in front of the surveillance, his eyes constantly scanning various screens, focused on finding these pleasures. His gaze was particularly focused on a man's room, where his cow was very big. He disliked superhumans, but he didn't dislike a very big cow. Pei Yuan still swallowed the bread with black ash and took a few sips of water from the faucet. Although it was difficult to swallow, he had no other choice now. After replenishing his energy and resting for a while, Pei Yuan followed the pitiful sunlight again and made movements with a large exposure area. Although the actions looked quite comical and eerie, he also knew that there were surveillance cameras with such scenes in the room. But he didn't forget either. Now he is a complete mental illness. In my previous memory, my predecessor also had various strange actions or imitated others. His strange behavior, coupled with his current identity, is nothing more normal than staying in this area. Without thinking about anything else, Pei Yuan followed the sun with all his heart and soul, and now he is the first to be affected by unlocking the skill of Doomsday. Exposure to sunlight, tireless for 2 consecutive days, apart from sleeping without sunlight, Pei Yuan has been following the movements of the sun, which can be said to be a waste of sleep and food. Only when the body cannot hold on due to prolonged stiffness, do you take a break next to it. The constant pressure here forces him to have the ability to protect himself. Strange movements can be tiring, but in a life or death situation, in order to survive. Even if playing the role of a Chinese person requires ancestral drinking milk, he will still fight for it on the rooftop of the building, Crescent Sky Chong. Now he has found that his actions shining on the sunlight have become steadily increasing in his role value. Doomsday play progress 4.8%. Destruction Day play progress 4.9%. With a wave of play points being fully invested and unlocked by him, the progress of the Doomsday panel's play has also been increased to 5%. Phase progress has been achieved, unlocking superpower. Destruction Ray. The next stage skill unlocking progress is 20.0%, ability. Destruction Ray. LV1, 0%, surprisingly, it was the heat rays of the Day of Destruction, which delighted Pei Yuan greatly. You should know that Superman has the ability to destroy every day, and thermal rays are incredibly strong, capable of directly exploding planets when powerful. Unfortunately, what he is currently giving is only level 1. With a slight movement of consciousness, Pei Yuan can feel a surge of heat in his eyes, as if he will emit a scorching red light in the next moment. Pei Yuan was aware that there was also a surveillance camera in this room, monitoring his actions and directly suppressing the idea of the experiment. However, according to the information conveyed by the system, he also understands the power of his super thermal rays, which cannot be controlled in size. However, the temperature can reach around 1,500 degrees Celsius and can already melt most of the metal steel. At the beginning, it was already so strong, not to mention the unparalleled and almost terrifying growth potential of Doomsday. At this moment, Pei Yuan couldn't help but glance at the iron prison door of the room, but temporarily suppressed his thoughts. Keep going and see if you can unlock the super powerful body of Doomsday. After all, he is still immortal now. Bullets don't have long eyes, and there is a lamplighter outside. If he's not careful, he might just cool off. Also, he needs to figure out if Storm Woman is still involved. Otherwise, with the ability of Storm Woman to fly, even if he escapes from the madhouse, it may be difficult for him to get rid of it in the future, and there will be a lot of trouble. In the laboratory, Dr. Carlton, dressed in a white research suit, is attentively observing the experimenter on the other side of the bulletproof glass, while verifying the previous sample file. But soon he was interrupted by the assistant who arrived. Dr. Carlton, guess what the students just discovered? A white young man, also dressed in work clothes, rushed in with great enthusiasm. Dr. Carlton glanced at his assistant and student, shook his head, and said, "Legrand, didn't anyone tell you that it's not suitable to keep a secret in the laboratory? If you don't tell me, I don't really want to hear." Seeing that the news did not catch the teacher's attention, Legrand looked a bit disheartened. "Just now, Bohr from the security department told me that the sample from last time was not dead." Carlton put down the document and lifted the framed glasses on his ear. "You said number 58. That Asian youth from last time." Legrand nodded and said, "Yes, it's that kid." I checked the surveillance footage and he's still lively and jumping around. Mentor, do you think he might have adapted to this version of compound number 5 and become a superhuman? Are there any superhuman manifestations at present? Legrand shook his head as he thought about the imitation actions mentioned by the Asian young man bore on the surveillance screen, which showed no other ability. It seems like he just likes to bask in the sun for a few days. Upon hearing this, Carlton patted Legrand's shoulder and said, "Then this is another lucky guy, Legrand. I hope you stay focused and don't draw conclusions so easily. Let's observe for a while before proceeding. If there is no problem, take him to the laboratory to inject more doses of the compound in half a month. I hope this lucky guy can bring us luck." Upon hearing Carlton's words, Legrand seemed to be poured down head on with a bucket of cold water. Being able to participate in and improve compound number 5, which can change the world and human history, has always been a source of pride for Legrand. However, with the support of the water group, the improvement plan for compound 5 remained as poor as ever after several years. For babies, the fusion level is good, but when injected into adults, it will either create monsters as usual or explode directly, with only a very small portion producing superpowers. Legrand's morale has been polished by endless failures. Bang! An experimental subject in the laboratory exploded in place on the other side of the bulletproof glass after injecting compound 5 with a modified composition. Blood and flesh were shattered, covered in glass, and the scene looked unbearable. Legrand's heart also trembled with it, but he found that his mentor Carlton seemed to be accustomed to this scene. He just calmly glanced at the file, lowered his head, and seemed indifferent. "Legrand, I think maybe we should bring the Asian kid on number 58 over and take a look. After all, anything is possible." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Me, I want to plant the sun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4, Me, I want to plant the sun. Huanpi Monkey, it seems that your lucky vacation has ended prematurely. Pei Yuan in the room was continuing to chase the sunlight when he heard a thumping sound from the sturdy iron door. Looking through the sound, Yate outside the glass grinned with his big white teeth and a look of schadenfreude on his face. Yate then opened the iron door. "Let's go to the laboratory with me." Yate held an electric baton in his right hand, smiled playfully, and patted it in the palm of his left hand, intending to disobey orders. But upon hearing this, Pei Yuan was somewhat surprised. According to past patterns, Dr. Carlton's mice change every 2 weeks, and today is only 10 days since his last time. Why did you repeat the experiment in advance? He plans to spend a few more days. Pei Yuan thought about these questions and followed Yate out of the room, ready to go and see what was going on. If he wanted to experiment now, although the risk of escaping is not low, he would also want to give it a try. Whenever there is a chance, simply turn the people inside into scum. The laboratory is located at the end of the corridor, and Pei Yuan is walking along the long corridor, observing the surroundings with his eyes unconsciously. Perhaps due to the fact that there were lighters as the base, the guards that Pei Yuan saw so far were not very tight, and only a few were carrying firearms. Of course, Pei Yuan will not easily reach a conclusion on this matter. However, after these few days, he learned from the conversation with the corridor guards that the Storm Woman had not yet begun to preside over the matter of the wise jungle mental illness. This is rare good news for Pei Yuan. "Hey, Dr. Carlton, can I help you?" Pei Yuan just walked into the experiment when he heard the voice of a lamplighter inside. "No need, just give the Asian kid number 58 a physical examination, and you just need to be on the side and pay attention to any unexpected situations." Dr. Carlton shook his head. Entering the laboratory, Pei Yuan saw Dr. Carlton in his memory and 2 researchers wearing white coats busy in the room. At the door stood a guard holding weapons, looking like an anesthetic gun to prevent accidents, while the lamplighter by the window habitually played with a fuel lighter in his hand. Pei Yuan, who has watched movies and TV shows, naturally knows about the lamplighter. It must be said that this lamplighter is also a ruthless person. During the existence of this mental hospital, many disobedient people burned residue on the hands of the lamplighter. It seems that this guy has blood on his hands and kills without blinking an eye. I don't know where this guy from movies and TV dramas feels guilty, but he would actually set himself on fire because of his own shame. At this moment, he wants to break through the situation. Apart from those firearms, the most threatening person in front of him is the lamplighter. Although this guy's fire control superpower requires a source of fire, his flaws are not overshadowed. The lantern lighter, who once stepped into the water group and became a member of tomorrow's Super 7, naturally has some impressive strength. However, this guy's physical fitness should still be average. Pei Yuan's eyes casually glanced at the heart of the lamplighter's chest. After Pei Yuan followed Yate into the laboratory, a young researcher wearing a white coat walked over and said kindly, "Don't be nervous, we're just checking your body." He couldn't help but be unfriendly. Many of these mental illnesses are explosive emotions, and he has no idea what will happen next. One of his colleagues was grabbed and twisted 3 times by a sudden explosive guy. If others reacted quickly enough, this guy might have to switch professions. Pei Yuan just looked at him, thinking to himself whether this physical examination was a proper one. In the next moment, the young researcher took him to a nearby area, not the previous isolation laboratory. Seeing that it was a normal medical device for physical examination, Pei Yuan only suppressed his temporarily activated heart. After a thorough examination, Dr. Carlton also followed in and said, "So, is there any abnormality in his body?" "Doctor, currently not yet. He has recovered well, but he has a slight cervical inflammation. It should be a problem that this guy had before entering a mental hospital, where he worked overtime all year round." The young researcher's answer clearly did not satisfy Dr. Carlton. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand and said, "No need to check. Send him back." The young researcher nodded and removed the devices for testing heart rate, blood pressure, and so on from Pei Yuan's body. Then, he waved to Yate, who was waiting at the door, to take the person back. There were no unexpected incidents on the way, so Pei Yuan naturally enjoyed seeing it succeed. And just as Pei Yuan walked to the entrance of the laboratory, Dr. Carlton suddenly walked over and blocked Pei Yuan's way. "Yate! Dr. Carlton!" Dr. Carlton waved his hand to signal him not to speak, then stared closely into Pei Yuan's eyes. Suddenly, he smiled and said, "Number 58, can you tell me why you want to shine?" Pei Yuan's heart trembled at the words, but then he pretended to be sneaky and looked around, then his voice became low. "I am plotting a big deal." "Oh, what's the big deal?" Carlton was curious. Not only curious, but even the people in the laboratory were attracted by his mysterious behavior and wanted to hear what this guy was going to say. Pei Yuan. "Oh, I want to plant the sun." Carlton. Dr. Carlton's face changed again and again, which made him couldn't help but curse his own foolishness. He actually had serious communication with a mentally ill person. "Can you give me a room with a big window?" Pei Yuan is still seriously defending his legitimate rights as a mentally ill person. This made Carlton's heart boil even more. "Take it away from me." Dr. Carlton gritted his teeth and roared, "I knew it. I knew it. These mentally unstable mental illnesses, how could I develop compound number 5 with stable drug properties? Use those unstable brains to stabilize it. I suggested earlier that Walter catch some homeless people over, those are the qualified experimental medicinal materials." In the laboratory, Carlton's student Legrand and his assistants remained silent and dared not touch Dr. Carlton's mold. The lamplighter by the window snapped and covered the fuel lighter in his hand, smiling. "Dr. Carlton, you should understand that those homeless people in the city are not easy to bring over. The military has always kept a close eye on Walter. For those assistants, Carlton can still scold casually, but for this superhuman who can control flames, Carlton still has some fear of being one of the 7 team lighters. He glanced at the lamplighter and did not speak. Instead, he took off his white coat and angrily left the laboratory. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Unlocking the Super Body. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5, Unlocking the Super Body. I have to say, you kid still has some ability to make Dr. Carlton look so angry. Thanks to you, it seems that Dr. Carlton has already gone to the what group building. It's unlikely that those homeless people in the city will have bad luck soon. On the way to see Pei Yuan back to his room, Yates saw Dr. Carlton driving out through the corridor window and immediately chuckled. Pei Yuan did not respond. Obviously his idea of a room with a large window and high sunlight intensity was in vain. Today is another sunny day, with good sunlight intensity. Pei Yuan stands in the room through the small window, absorbing the limited amount of sunlight energy. At noon, Pei Yuan learned another piece of information from the talkative Yate. Dr. Carlton seems to have never wanted to use these mental illnesses to conduct experiments on Compound 5, believing that his experiment's slow progress is due to poor quality test products. So I plan to spend it on the water group. So obviously, his time in the laboratory may have been postponed again. Pei Yuan has enough time to play the role of destruction, sunbathing, and returning to play the role of value. Play value +1, play value +2. Like in a prison room, Pei Yuan's body formed a line with the slanted beam of light entering, bathing his entire body in the sunlight as much as possible. The playing value on Pei Yuan's panel is maintaining a constant speed and growing rapidly. It has to be said that everything is easy at the beginning and difficult at the end. Now that you can unlock 10% of the progress of the next skill, the required play value increases exponentially compared to the previous first stage. And now the only thing Pei Yuan can do is to play the role of destroying the sun and basking in it, seizing every moment when the sun appears at the window. Even the guards in the security room shook their heads when they saw Pei Yuan's eerie appearance. They would only think that this guy's mental illness was even more severe, almost bewildered. The rest of the day was like this, making him almost forget the time, and only the time when Yate or other staff brought food every day made Pei Yuan realize how long time had passed. At dusk, after the last sun on the horizon set, Pei Yuan, as usual, directly added the day's performance gains to his acting progress. And this time, there was a different prompt sound as usual. The unlocking progress has reached 10%. Unlocking ability, super strong body. A inexplicable heat stream swept through one's limbs, transforming one's body. Pei Yuan was taken aback for a moment, then opened the panel and saw an extra line of words in the ability column, his joy overflowing with words. Suddenly, he checked the current strength of this super strong body and found that Pei Yuan was already immune to ordinary weapon attacks, and even had a certain level of immunity to bullets. Although Pei Yuan felt regretful for not being completely immune to bullets, the current strength of his body also gave him more confidence in escaping from here. Preventing bullets is one purpose, and a more important one is to guard against anesthesia guns that shoot out from the darkness. After all, in order to prevent mental patients from escaping, these guard rooms are equipped with many anesthesia guns, which make a quieter sound than ordinary firearms and always make people's defense very annoying. In the next few days, no one took Pei Yuan to the laboratory for experiments, and he stayed in the room, basking in the sun to increase his acting value. Dr. Carlton in the laboratory seems to be at odds with the senior executives of the water group at this moment. It has been half a month since Pei Yuan conducted the last experiment, and there is no sign of Dr. Carlton returning. And the way to leave is obviously the best way to go to the laboratory. After all, I don't have to spend time destroying this iron gate, and then cross several layers of defense to reach the position of the gate. Due to the camera, he didn't even have the opportunity to practice his own destructive ray, and he didn't know how long it would take to break it. As time passed, Pei Yuan continued to absorb the role value given by the sunlight during the day, while also exploring the protective measures inside the mental hospital, and waiting for his second opportunity to conduct experiments. He has already made a decision. If there are no accidents, then he plans to wait until the next time on his way to the laboratory, passing through the gate for defense, and take the opportunity to escape. The play points obtained in the past few days still enter the field, but the progress consumption of unlocking has further increased. Therefore, Pei Yuan decided to temporarily keep them for unlocking, but instead keep them waiting for upgrading skills. As for escaping from this mental hospital, having the ability to destroy radiation and super strong body is already sufficient. After all, the top superhumans of the water group are still in the water building. 2 days passed again, and one night, after eating the hard-to-swallow food at Pei Yuan, he leaned back in bed to rest. However, as he was about to fall asleep, a crisp sound of the door woke him up. Pei Yuan suddenly opened his eyes and saw the iron gate open. A familiar white figure walked in from outside, and it was the white man Yate. Pei Yuan was puzzled in his heart. Dinner has already been delivered, what does this guy want to come at this time? However, when he saw Pei Yuan stand up, Yate's face showed a hint of lewd smile, which coincided with the smile that Pei Yuan had seen on TV when the lecherous thieves treated ignorant girls. But now the role of that ignorant girl has been replaced by herself. Hee, kid, you haven't done it yet, have you? I'll give you a blast today. Yate, who walked into the room, saw Pei Yuan's expression becoming increasingly lewd and nauseating. Pei Yuan didn't realize that this guy was actually a good fag. In the security room, Pol, who was on the night shift, also noticed the operation of Naat in the room. He shook his head silently, pressed a button, and shifted the position of the camera away. The movement of the camera naturally couldn't hide from Yat in the room. He looked up and shook his head regretfully, sighing, "You boring guy." Then his face turned to Pei Yuan in the room, and he chuckled as he took off his pants. "Let you see my baby." "Oh, what do you think?" Pei Yuan rubbed his eyes and stood in front of Yate, calmly saying a sentence. This eerie calm tone suddenly made Yat's whole body furry. He suddenly had a bad premonition and roared, "Shet, what else do you yellow-skinned monkey want to do?" Pei Yuan stood expressionless in place, pouting in disgust. Then his eyes suddenly turned red, and in Yate's ghostly gaze, 2 scorching red rays flashed under his crotch. In an instant, the red light flashed by, and there seemed to be a burnt smell floating in the room. Yate's expression froze as he saw a ghost, and the next moment he collapsed to the ground. Legs straightened, facial features almost twisted together in an instant, face turned pale, and then quickly turned pale and lifeless. His robust body curled up like cooked shrimp, his hands uncontrollably trying to cover and block it, but not daring. That thing is now like a pile of sand, if touched, it turns into pitch black dust. The intense pain made him sweat profusely, almost leaving his soul. He opened his mouth and wanted to scream, but could only let out a silent scream. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. I Read It, and Then What About It, Collection and Follow-Up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6, I Have Read It, and Then. Please collect and follow up. I looked, and then what? Pei Yuan calmly stared into Yate's eyes. However, at this moment, Yate could not answer. He was filled with endless pain and could not hear anything else. He looked at the figure of Pei Yuan with an expression on his face. The pain made his body tremble, and the incomprehensible heat rays filled his eyes with fear. He doesn't understand. I also can't understand. Pei Yuan didn't want the other party to understand either. He glanced at Yate's pitch black, carbonized thing, and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. With a loud bang. Step down with 1 foot. That thing suddenly looked like scattered sand, shattering into black ash all over the ground. Pei Yuan stepped over Yate's body and disgusted him, chopping his feet on the ground. He sighed, "It's better to lift the uncontrollable bar." Yate looked incredulously at the black ash on the ground between his legs, his eyes empty for a moment. His pain lingered for a moment, and the arc of pain finally rushed to the vocal cords without stopping. Ah! A blazing heat ray shot directly at his head, emitting a hissing sound when it encountered water. The high temperature melted it into a black-brown solid of coke. It's Pei Yuan's sword repair that has arrived. He doesn't want to see any more vengeful superhumans emerge from behind, such as the king without G. At this moment, in the monitoring room, the strong flickering light in Pei Yuan's room also attracted Boar's attention. He frowned, although he didn't want to see the scene of Yates' battle, he still controlled the camera to move back to its original position. Look at this. Coincidentally, he saw the scene of Pei Yuan's destructive rays piercing Yates' head, leaving him on the spot in an instant. Oh shit, what the hell is going on? The next moment, a blazing light rushed towards the screen, making it pitch black. Boar was so frightened that he fell to the ground, and a wave of fear filled his chest. Then he suddenly reacted and stumbled up, using all his strength to tap the red button on the table. Buzz, the piercing sound of an alarm directly spread throughout the entire mental hospital. Pei Yuan, who never stops working, understands the importance of war and the speed of action. The scorching heat rays continuously shoot out from his eyes, constantly destroying the prison doors that hold mental patients. In the end, his heat rays became more and more proficient, making it easy to hit the iron lock of the prison door and melt it. Through the chaos, Pei Yuan also approached the exit of the building. At night, what the hell is going on? Those guards can't serve dim sum. Roger, who was looking at the report in the laboratory across from him, heard the piercing alarm sound and cursed as he put down the document. Open the door and see what those damn guys are up to. Halfway through, I saw a figure in the hallway ahead, as well as the piercing red light gradually disappearing around their eyes as they opened an iron door. Two people looking at each other. Legrand's body froze. I still remember the Asian figure of Legrand. It seems to be the guy from number 58, whose Chinese name is what kind of tongue twister Pei. But what is the situation now? Does the other party really seem to have superpowers? Legrand's eyes flickered as he saw the rooms in the hallway where the fuse had been opened, and then he saw the guy in front of him. Looking at the Asian young man's gaze, Legrand also squeezed out a kind smile and said, "Come out for a walk this big night. Let the caregiver arrange a room with a big window for you tomorrow." Pei Yuan continued to stare at him. Legrand felt a little uneasy in his heart. You should know, he once attended a research conference and faced the high-level executives around the water group, but he didn't panic. He didn't panic when he met the 7-man team with that superpower. But when he saw that number 58, he finally panicked. You should know. He is still facing some people ahead. There is also human logic. But what he is facing now is a real mental illness. Still. A mental illness with superpowers. He faced someone who no one wanted to face, and the veins on Legrand's forehead were beating, and a layer of sweat had already formed on his back. Oh my, I suddenly remembered that there is still a file left in the office. Legrand suddenly slapped his head, then turned around and walked towards the position of the laboratory behind him, looking as if he had forgotten something. The next moment a blazing heat ray directly pierced through a huge hole in Legrand's chest. Legrand lowered his head and looked at his chest, surrounded by a circle of charcoal. He smelled the burnt smell and suddenly showed a hint of self-deprecation on his face before falling down. The piercing alarm echoed over the mental hospital, waking up the endless night long ago. Countless lights were lit up around, and there were constant noises coming from around. People were everywhere, and the scene was chaotic. Ah! Block it, quickly block it for me. As other trapped superhuman mental illnesses roamed around, the scene became even more chaotic. Because of the various bizarre skills of superhumans, some even don't know how they died. They saw a companion's body suddenly explode into a sky full of flesh and blood, and a companion's brain was corroded by saliva. I even saw a companion being beaten to death by a mentally ill cow like a python. Oh, that scene, they can't shake it off in their minds. Damn it, where's the anesthesia gun? Hurry up and put me on the anesthesia gun. The person who lit the light hasn't arrived yet. Before Pei Yuan could reach the end of the hallway, 2 armed guards appeared in front of him, with the black muzzle facing Pei Yuan directly. Don't move. If you move again, I'll shoot. However, before the other party could finish speaking, Pei Yuan's eyes lit up with red light and he launched a destructive ray. The 2 blazing rays of light, like shells, glared directly at him. The air was filled with a burnt smell, and the 2 guards lost their heads directly. Wilson, the security manager who rushed to the monitoring room, was also dumbfounded when he saw this scene on the screen. Isn't this thing a patent of the Chinese people? Surprisingly, this mental illness also exists. What the hell did that damn doctor create? He immediately picked up the walkie-talkie and roared, "Area B channel. Area B channel, pay attention to number 58, the target will have laser eyes. Change the strategy. His mother, put away the anesthesia gun for me. If you meet me, shoot directly." Now he no longer cares about whether this is Walter's precious asset or any research value. If he doesn't kill it directly, his subordinates will probably die with just one glance. And now, under the blessing of the destructive ray, Pei Yuan is almost like a god blocking the killing of gods and Buddha, and any guard who appears in front of him is stared to death by him. If you didn't stare at me, just 2 eyes. Along the way, there were naturally bullets that hit him, but they were all blocked by his super strong body. Although his body was also red and swollen, it always blocked the bullets. Obviously, the current level is still too low, but it is enough for him to withstand fatal damage. The superhumans in the mental hospital were scattered and the entire experimental base was in chaos. Pei Yuan successfully approached the exit of the building. As he walked straight to the front door, Pei Yuan's hands trembled slightly and his heart was excited. After opening this door, he passed through another one and was about to be free. Bang! The door was violently pushed open, and a dazzling and hot light squeezed in through the crack. Pei Yuan's pupils suddenly shrank, and the sudden flames left him unable to react in time. The scorching flames hit his body, causing him to be lifted up by immense force and hit the wall. In an instant, Pei Yuan's remaining light flashed past the figure of the lamplighter. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Who stipulates that superhumans cannot use water guns? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Who stipulates that superhumans cannot use water guns? The scorching flames flickered on the surface of his body, and Pei Yuan could even feel the sensation of flames flowing through his skin. Because the flames flickered away, it felt very hot and there was no burning sensation yet. Yu Guang looked at the person holding a fuel lighter with a cautious expression on his face. Pei Yuan simply closed his eyes and lay motionless in the ruins on the ground. The blackened appearance of his whole body made the oncoming lamplighter's nervous mood slightly relax, but he still dared not relax his guard. Superhumans have never been able to measure it with common sense. This guy is still a bit difficult to deal with, I want him to experience the feeling of offending me well. Seeing Pei Yuan lying motionless, a black security guard smiled with satisfaction and took a baton from a guard beside him. He walked up with a cruel expression on his face. If I were you, I wouldn't have approached him at this time. The nearby lamplighter glanced at him and said. The black guard paused upon hearing the words and thought for a moment, what you said makes sense. After speaking, he stopped and replaced the electric baton in his hand with a rifle from the nearby guard. He directly fired a few shots at Pei Yuan, who was lying on the ground with unknown details. Damn it, it's swollen. Pei Yuan had already felt the location of the bullet landing, and the swelling and pain rushed towards his face. His strategy of pretending to be unconscious or dead, waiting for the lamplighter to approach and give him a head attack, came to nothing. He decided not to pretend and opened his eyes and flashed 2 laser eyes at the position of the lamplighter. The lamplighter, who had been paying attention to Pei Yuan's movements, reacted quickly. The scorching light made his hair stand on end, and he narrowly avoided it before the other person's eyes lit up with red light. Seeing the iron door melting into a ball on his side, the lamplighter's face looked very ugly. Such a powerful heat radiation reminded him of his former teammate, a native of China, who was likely to be injured and die upon contact. Moreover, the opponent's body may have been strengthened for some reason, and a big fireball that forcefully hit him appeared unscathed, with only black ash from his clothes remaining unburned. The lamplighter is more vigilant and reacts quickly, so the black guard is not so lucky. Pei Yuan's destructive rays swept through the waist of the black guard and carbonized wherever they went. The black security guard let out a mournful shout, and a round of aimless bullets instinctively shot out and fell to the ground, leaving no rest. Bang! A flame burst out from the corner of the wall, and the lamplighter took the opportunity to hold the fuel lighter in front of him, while the other hand controlled the burst of flames. In the entire hall, the entrance was a crimson hue, and the scorching sensation felt like one was in a furnace, which can be said to be in a furnace. Pei Yuan's eyes were filled with heat, and a circle of red light lit up. Two terrifying rays burst out again, facing the arm holding the fuel lighter. As long as there is no source of fire, this lantern man's ability will be of no use. Obviously, the lamplighter was also concerned about this point and did not want to have one less hand on his arm. When he saw that Pei Yuan's eyes were red, he quickly withdrew his arm. The flames disappeared, and Pei Yuan was even more reckless, rushing directly towards the spot where the light was lit. The hot gaze kept scanning the location of the lamplighter, making him unable to stand up throughout the journey. At this moment, the lamplighter was sweating profusely, cursing the damn Carlton in creating such a damn thing. This guy has laser eyes and a body that can prevent bullets. Besides not being able to fly, what's the difference between this guy and the Chinese people? If there is a difference, it is that this guy's radium radiation should be weaker than that of the Chinese people, otherwise he wouldn't be able to hide behind a wall for so long. The lamplighter adjusted his position to avoid the laser eye while paying attention to the movement of number 58 as he approached a corner. Right now. With a wave of the right hand, the flames on the lighter suddenly enlarged as if gasoline additives were added. Then, under the control of the lamplighter, it shot out in that direction, like a fiery python that seemed to devour everything. However, in the next moment, a huge water column accurately hit the kerosene lighter in his hand. Puzzy. The flames in the water suddenly disappeared, and those rootless flames naturally disappeared in an instant. Looking at the fire-water gun in Pei Yuan's hand, the lamplighter was completely bewildered. The person who reacted quickly lit the lamp, but the kerosene lighter with water in the fire fluff and the sparks that were only rubbed by flint. Shit. Do you think I only have one lighter? The lamplighter roared angrily, avoiding the direction of the water column, and took out a spare kerosene lighter from his pocket. However, Pei Yuan sneered and directly turned the muzzle of the fire-water gun, changing the caliber to the smallest and expanding the coverage of the water column. The lamplighter was completely drenched in water, and the newly lit flame in his hand was extinguished by the water column with a popping sound in the next moment. I was dumbfounded when I lit the light. He suddenly regretted why he used a kerosene lighter that looked too aggressive. Seeing that both lighters in his hand were useless, the lamplighter gritted his teeth and turned to run in the direction of another office building. Without his superpowers, he is at most stronger than ordinary people now. However, at this moment, Pei Yuan would not let this difficult guy leave. His gaze fixed, and two crimson rays of destruction burst out directly. Falling on the back of the lamplighter, directly penetrating it, the large black hole in the body shines brightly, and you can see the faint light in the room ahead. The lamplighter lay on the ground, unable to understand even to death. How could there be a mental illness, a superhuman, who even thought of using a fire-water gun to deal with him? This is his mother ridiculous. After the death of the lamplighter, Pei Yuan's escape journey suddenly lost a major obstacle, and the remaining defense forces were simply not enough to fear. Scorching a few inconspicuous individuals, Pei Yuan quickly approached the parking spot, where some staff cars were parked. At this moment, due to the chaos in the building, many researchers who felt the situation was not good rushed to the parking lot to prepare to drive and escape from the already mentally ill superhuman buildings. The key. Where is my key? A female researcher ran to the side of the car in a panic, but did not find the key. She waited until she trembled and found the key from her bag, ready to open the door. A figure stood in front of him. Give me the key. Pei Yuan stared at her with red eyes and gestured. The female researcher was stunned when she saw this person, her whole body powerless and falling to the ground. Don't kill me. I was forced. Pei Yuan looked at the female researcher with a hint of rain inside. Is that so? Then I sympathize with you too. Right, right. The female researcher was overjoyed. But it's none of my business. A crimson-hot gaze filled the female researcher's pupils. Pei Yuan ignored the female researcher's crying and after asking if he had any location on her, he sent her a message. Then he snatched the key from her hand and opened the car door, sat in and inserted the key to start the fire. This guy ultimately said he was forced, but he was not ambiguous about giving injections to those struggling patients before. Bang bang. Bullets are constantly shooting towards us. Make the vehicle and engine hood riddled with holes. Pei Yuan drove directly and stepped on the gas pedal, and the car rushed straight towards the direction of the gate. Along the way, the destructive rays in my eyes constantly aimed at the cars on both sides of the parking spaces, aimed at the fuel tank position, and exploded the cars one by one. With a loud bang. The fragile iron gate crashed open, and Pei Yuan's car rushed straight onto the road, plunging into the lonely night amidst gunfire and bullets. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Walter Group's response. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Walter Group's response. Damn it. Hurry up and catch up with him. Watching Pei Yuan drive away, Wilson, the person in charge of the mental hospital, roared at the remaining subordinates. Sir, all the vehicles have been blasted by the laser eye of number 58, we don't have any vehicles. It will take time to switch from other vehicles. The yelled guard was sweating profusely and quickly explained to the person in charge. Damn it, damn it. The person in charge, Wilson, punched the wall with a gloomy expression. Experimenter 58 fled, still carrying a superhuman with laser eyes. With such an important asset, he could already imagine the thunderous anger of the water group. Whose car is that? Lock the location for me. Also, report this matter to Walter Support. Watching the ruins and walls of the guard still cleaning up the mess, Wilson gritted his teeth and ordered. My hands, my hands. A guard hurriedly ran out of the building. His arms melted like ice and snow, revealing a terrifying forest of white bones, making him scream uncontrollably. Wilson also turned pale when he saw the superhuman rushing out behind the guard, spitting out mucus. Number 58 escaped. But there are still numbers 38 and 48. The battle here is not over yet in Manhattan, New York. The towering skyscrapers can be seen in this financial capital. The Water Group building is particularly prominent among these, as its smooth mirror-like walls are surrounded by superhero billboards. 87th floor, CEO's office. A fiery figure pushed open the door. She was dressed in work clothes, with a head of golden wavy hair. Her face, which was almost 50 years old, still had a charming charm. With a tablet in her hand, she walked confidently to the room. Seeing a black man sitting on the sofa, looking down at the night view outside the window, he breathed a sigh of relief. Mr. Edgar, there's a problem with the Sage Jungle Center in Pennsylvania. The blonde woman hurriedly stepped forward when she saw the man's figure. What's wrong, Madeline? I've never seen you so embarrassed before. Edgar, the CEO of What who had come to his senses, was also slightly surprised by Madeline's expression. Just now, news came from the Sage Jungle Center that there was a riot at the experimental site. One experimenter escaped, and that experimenter also had laser eyes and bulletproof skills. Edgar frowned. The Sage Jungle Center is a research base that he secretly controls and has been studying the stability of Compound 5. Madeline nervously handed over the tablet in her hand and said, "Sir, look at this." Edgar, the true figure in power of the water group, remained silent after taking the tablet from her hand and seeing its contents. Above is a young Asian face, standing amidst a pile of ruins and debris. The striking ones are those sharp crimson eyes, constantly emitting a scorching and terrifying light, sweeping everything. That kind of light that sweeps everything is almost identical to the laser eyes of the Chinese people. Edgar continued to look back, his gaze pausing at the scene of two guards shooting at the Asian face, the young man touching his body, and two laser beams sending the guards away. The video zoomed in and he saw bullets blocking outside the skin. Motherland. Edgar's gaze paused. Seeing the scene of his eyes emitting lasers and his body pounding with bullets, Edgar unintentionally compared it to his homeland. "It looks like a replica of our motherland." Madeline took a deep breath and quickly stepped forward to explain, "Yes, just like a Chinese, the experimental department has just evaluated the strength of number 58. Currently, based on the on-site situation, the opponent's superpowers, apart from laser eyes, have a decent strengthening body. His laser eyes have a thermal energy intensity that can melt steel. Based on the traces on site, it is estimated to be around 1,600 degrees, which is much worse than the laser eyes of the Chinese people." There was some silence in the office, and after a moment, Edgar touched his forehead and said, "Have you found anyone now?" Madeline's face looked a bit ugly. "Not yet." After leaving the center of the Sage Jungle on the 58th, she kept heading south and abandoned her car for hiking before entering the residential area. Once she got there, it ended. Did the lamplighter not stop him? Madeline paused in her tone and said, "The lamplighter has died, and his heart has turned into a piece of coke." Edgar leaned back and leaned against the back of the chair, slowly rubbing his brows. "Things aren't too bad yet, it's just a research institute. You should be grateful that this guy is a mental patient." "Madeline, what do you plan to do?" Madeline said, "Clean up the jungle of wise men and prepare the public relations department." A severely mentally ill patient lost control and ignited gas, causing an explosion in the central gas pipeline, resulting in heavy casualties in the hospital. The lamplighter bravely sacrificed himself to protect the patient. Regarding Madeline's adaptability, Edgar nodded and said, "Just do as you think. I hope the impact of this matter is minimized, and by the way, I'll inform Carlton to change places." After a pause, he said again, "Prepare a few homeless people for him. I want to see if he can replicate the ability of number 58. Madeline thought for a moment and said, "Should Storm Woman take care of that research institute in New Jersey?" Storm Woman is the widow of the founder of the Water Group and one of the top 7 players. She has a strong ability to control storms, but this guy is a down-to-earth racist. Especially targeting black people. If it weren't for a special moment, Madeline wouldn't have mentioned this person in front of her black boss. Sure enough, Edgar's face darkened, and a sharp gaze appeared in his eyes. "Madeline, just take care of your sonny big boy and let him be more calm. Walter has been wiping his buttocks many times for his childish behavior recently. The sonny boy naturally speaks of his motherland. In the last hostage rescue, he killed another hostage and later successfully turned a suicide victim into a homicide. Due to these nannies doing the usual post-work, Walter almost broke his leg." Madeline hurriedly nodded and retreated, as various departments of the Water Group began to prepare for this sudden event. At this moment in Carlton at the Walt Tower, my mood is quite good. Because of his rational arguments, just now, Ms. Madeline, the vice president of the Water Group, finally approved his proposal and planned to get him a few normal test samples. What just made him feel a bit strange was why he wanted to suddenly change places this time. "Ms. Madeline, I think my current workplace is quite suitable for me. I don't really want to change places." Madeline glanced at him and said, "Are you sure?" "I am very certain. An hour ago, a situation occurred in the center of the sage jungle where you were located, and the guards were almost completely killed or injured. Even your student, Legrand, died at the hands of number 58. How could it be?" Carlton's face was full of disbelief, and before he left, there was still a lamplighter presiding over the situation. "How could it be said no and then it's gone? So this can only be asked of yourself, Dr. Carlton. I hope it's not your problem this time." Madeline handed him a tablet and asked him to check it himself. Opening the surveillance video of the Sage Jungle Center, Carlton saw the scene and remained silent for a long time. The content on the screen is very clear. There is indeed a problem at the center of the Sage Jungle, with patients fleeing in chaos and superhuman killings. His student also died directly in it. The initiator is the 58th Asian youth. Legrand's words became a prophecy, and the Asian youth of number 58 did indeed become a superhuman, a rare and powerful superhuman. Carlton's heart trembled. It is a fortunate thing to feel that I have avoided this disaster in the dark. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Detecting the superpowers of black people within 10 kilometers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9, Detecting the Superpowers of Black People Within 10 Kilometers. Harris is a businessman who has been wandering in the gray areas on the edge of the law for years. He has learned to create things that everyone likes. For example, restricted drugs and firearms, or something that can be equated with a beauty knife. However, even so, in today's society filled with superheroes, there are some unspoken taboos in their profession. That's not to provoke superhumans. Those non-human monsters possess various bizarre abilities that make them unable to defend themselves. Even the deterrent firearms they hold can sometimes lose their effectiveness. Last time, due to a superhuman monster, he lost a big business and a brother, and now he has to enter this chaotic neighborhood. Looking up at the time, Harris stood up under the dim light and walked into the agreed alley. Today he is going to meet up with several members of the black community to reach a weapons deal. I heard those black people say that recently they have been targeted by a superhuman guy named Blue Eagle who is racist. Claiming that guy seems to have awakened a superpower that can detect black people within 10 kilometers nearby, because that guy always finds black people who are alone. To be honest, when Harris found out they were dealing with superhumans, he intended to terminate the deal, although their speculation about the superhuman superpowers was somewhat peculiar. But unfortunately, they gave too much. It seems that time is still early, so Harris stood at the agreed location and waited. However, at this moment, a strange sound came from a street across the street. Harris followed the sound and suddenly saw a strange shadow walking out of the alley. Under the dim light, Harris saw the black figure gradually becoming clearer, and then he squinted his eyes. That was a pitch-black person, with only the face of an Asian youth visible. Upon closer inspection, he found that the person was as black as charcoal, without any clothing. This guy can't be that Blue Eagle, can he? Harris's expression became tense, his gaze paused, and he clenched the box in his hand. However, thinking that Blue Eagle should be a white person, seeing the other person walking down the street with an unarmed appearance slightly relieved my heart. However, the strange Asian youth approached him. "Wait. Stay away from me, you guy." Harris pulled out a silencing pistol, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light, and angrily rebuked. This Asian young man was naturally Pei Yuan, who had escaped from the center of the sage jungle. After realizing his presence, he set his sights on him. Pei Yuan turned a blind eye to the threat of bullets in the opponent's hand. After sensing something was wrong with the other party, Harris fired a shot directly at Pei Yuan. This was originally intended for him to prepare a way out for the black people, but it was unexpectedly used on an Asian who appeared inexplicably. He just froze in the next moment. The bullet in his pistol hit the opponent's body, but it didn't seem to bring him the desired effect. Pei Yuan gritted his teeth and pulled the flattened bullet off his body skin, throwing it to the ground. The crisp metallic sound of landing was like a slap on his face, mocking his incompetence. Harris instinctively quickened his breathing, and his spirits were rising. The other party is a superhuman. Still a superhuman capable of withstanding bullets. Harris cursed his luck and started preparing to run away. If you dare to leave, I dare to blow your head out. If you don't believe me, you can give it a try. Pei Yuan stared at him with a murderous aura. Harris's foot froze in place. I'm not very interested in what you want to do. Find me a secluded place to live. I won't do anything to you, otherwise I won't know what will happen. Pei Yuan twisted a dagger from his waist and kindly reminded him. A superhuman friendship, or even an enemy, it seems you should know how to choose. It seemed reasonable, and Harris breathed a sigh of relief. Then he kept cursing the goddess of luck in his heart, but how could he casually encounter a plague god? Harris had no choice but to find his car and drive Pei Yuan to a remote residence. This is already the edge of Pennsylvania, far from the center of the sage jungle, and Pei Yuan is very satisfied. He didn't slack off his guard about this Harris either, and after following Harris to find out that he hadn't reported anything, he temporarily calmed down. The next morning. In front of the mirror in the room, Pei Yuan couldn't help but sigh as he looked at his body. Due to the night's battle, he was covered in black and white spots, all of which were marks left by bullets on his body. At present, his body does have the ability to defend against fatal bullet injuries, but the kinetic energy still causes him a lot of damage. However, this situation is also much better. Next, Pei Yuan will take a look at his attribute panel. The Zhutian Play System, current role model. Doomsday. Template unlocking progress. 10.8%. Ability. Destruction Ray. LV1, 3.8%, super strong body. LV1, 8.2%. Play value. 862, seeing the final number play value, Pei Yuan couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. Before this, it was only a pitiful 100, but after that night's melee, it directly increased the playing value by more than 700. Especially the lamplighter who died in his hands, providing him with over 400 role.playing points, a guy is worth a day's harvest. At this moment, Pei Yuan couldn't help but sigh. As the name suggests, destruction and destruction are the best way to play the role of Doomsday. Find the TV in the room, turn it on, and search for news. After watching several advertisements featuring superheroes from the Water Group, Pei Yuan finally saw the Today News from Pennsylvania as he wished. The incident at the center of the sage jungle did not occupy much space. The introduction is somewhat interesting. It is said that in a mental hospital, due to an oversight, a severely mentally ill patient ignited gas, causing an explosion in the gas pipeline, resulting in heavy casualties for the patient. The lamplighter was packaged as a hero who bravely sacrificed himself to save mentally ill patients. The Chinese people on TV expressed regret for the sacrifice of their retired former teammate, the lamplighter, and announced in the live broadcast that they will strengthen the safety precautions of mental hospitals, so that Pennsylvania residents do not have to panic and live in peace of mind. Finally, let's also pay attention to the selection activity for the 7th member of the Walter Super 7. Seeing this, Pei Yuan sneered. He couldn't help but marvel at the strong public relations capabilities of the Water Group. A negative event suddenly turned into another opportunity for Water to boost the reputation of superheroes. The hidden dark things inside were swept clean. And while Pei Yuan was watching the news, in a room in Manhattan, New York, former head of the Joint Investigation Bureau's Black Action Team, Butcher, was also seeing the news. Due to his hostility towards the Water Group, he never misses any news about the Water Group. In the past few days, he saw news that one of the 7 men's train locomotives had killed an ordinary person, and was preparing to do something about it. After reading the content, Butcher's face was filled with a sarcastic expression. "Shit, the lamplighter will die for saving people." A year ago, the lamplighter burned the grandsons of his old boss Mallory alive in order to stop his investigation into superhumans. The consequences of this incident directly led to Mallory's disheartened disbandment of the Black Action Group, and the Joint Inspection Bureau subsequently sealed files, expelled relevant personnel, and prohibited further investigations into superhumans. Saying that this guy will bravely sacrifice himself for saving people is similar to believing that God is a gay, and he doesn't believe every word of the Walter news. "Walter, what the hell are you hiding?" Booker leaned closer to the TV screen and stared closely at the photo of the mental hospital on the screen, squinting her eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Forrest Werewolf Nelson. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10, Forrest Werewolf Nelson, The Roof of a Room in Pennsylvania. Harris, who was inside the safe room, was moving several mirrors from the room to the balcony and forming a circle. This was naturally the request of the superhuman he met last night. To be honest, he didn't quite understand what that Asian superhuman was trying to do. However, at present, that superhuman is quite easy to talk about as long as he follows the requirements. Without excessive demands from the superhuman, Harris only wanted to send away the superhuman plague god as soon as possible. As for confrontation, he dare not have such thoughts at all. It is no different from seeking death. The lesson of one of his brothers has always reminded him. Are there any other superhumans in these blocks? Pei Yuan, who had eaten his fill, came to the balcony and asked the white man in front of him. To be honest, after discovering that fighting or killing those superhumans can significantly increase their role value, Pei Yuan thought of killing some. Anyway, there aren't many good people among the superhumans in this world. I'm not sure about this, I usually don't do business related to superhumans. Harris is telling the truth that many of the superhumans he encounters are people who cannot communicate properly. With his own abilities, it is extremely normal for him to even try his best. I'm not sure about superhumans, do you know a guy with a black beard named Butcher? Pei Yuan still doesn't understand the current time point, while idle in the center of the jungle. He inferred from the fact that Stormwind had not yet taken over the center of the Sage Jungle that the time should have been before the start of the protagonist group event. If he could get close to the main characters, he naturally wanted to add a few heads along the way. For example, invisible people. As a retired lamplighter, he could provide him with so much role-playing value, and he would never give up on the invisible head. Otherwise, it would be a pity, and the increased role value of the guards who were shot before is almost negligible. At present, Butcher is still focused on killing the 7 giants. As for the moment when he finally found a soldier boy to deal with the Chinese people, he went against the tide. Pei Yuan has always thought that there might be some superhumans in the water group who control their thinking, otherwise he would not be able to understand Butcher's actions that are as green as a green-haired turtle. In order to save the son of his own enemy or the son he gave birth to with his wife, he helped his enemy deal with the helper he had found. This makes one have to doubt Butcher's psychological state at that time. Recalling the impression in his mind, Harris spoke up and said, "This person is very famous in the black market and can fight and resist. It is said that he used to be a member of the Joint Inspection Bureau and a famous tough character. But recently that guy is said to be investigating the locomotive, perhaps because the locomotive killed a passerby while blocking a bank robber. The locomotive is one of the 7 giants of the water group, known as the fastest man in the United States." Harris really can't understand, and some people dare to investigate that kind of non-human body. What is the difference between this and sending someone to death for those extraordinary superhumans? Upon hearing these, Pei Yuan pondered. He remembered that in the original plot, the locomotive was not actually blocking the robbers. But during the process of transporting Compound 5, he ingested it, causing his ability to lose control and killing Robin, the girlfriend of one of the main characters on the roadside, Huey. Of course, these have little to do with Pei Yuan. He mainly comes to judge the timeline of the development of things. If the Invisible Man is not dead yet, then he has great potential. Currently, he does not want to directly confront Walter. We need to first increase our role value, then develop some abilities, and wait for our strength to improve. After Harris set up the mirror, Pei Yuan walked in and sat on a chair surrounded by a circle of mirrors. The mirrors around him and the sunlight reflected and gathered on him. At this moment, Pei Yuan realized that there was not much feeling of heat when shining on the sun like this, and he also noticed that the growth rate of his role value had increased to a certain extent. These increases are still a drop in the bucket in the face of rising consumption, but there is always better than nothing. After watching for a while, Pei Yuan looked at Harris, who was playing with firearms in the room, and said, "Can you help me check the address of this butcher or a guy named Huey who works at a video store?" Harris looked at Pei Yuan's strange behavior sitting in the focused sunlight and shook his head. "I don't want to have a relationship with that ruthless character, and his position is also difficult to check. As for that Huey guy, there are so many people with the same name in New York, I'm not sure if I can find him." Pei Yuan smiled and said, "In return, I can do you a favor, such as killing an opponent, or some superhuman." The parts in Harris's hand trembled, and Pei Yuan's words suddenly reminded him of the superhuman scum who had killed his brother and taken away a batch of goods from him. I have to say that the words of this Asian youth in front of him made him a little moved. After a long time, Harris said, "There's a guy named Nelson, he's nicknamed Forest Werewolf. At the same time, a water security department in Pennsylvania." "Oh shit, Jake, what did you bring back?" Wilson from Walter's security department looked at a guy brought in by his subordinates from outside and exclaimed in surprise. This is clearly a normal young man with white skin, but his slender and curved hair covers his entire face, covering his face. The most prominent feature is the long nose that protrudes between the faces, resembling a dog's nose. Make the whole person look like a wild dog coming out of the mountains and forests. Nelson, the forest werewolf, has an extremely sensitive sense of smell, even more powerful than the most sensitive dogs. The henchman named Jack introduced him. After Experimenter 58 fled, the Chinese people came and turned for a while without any results, thinking about cracking down on piracy and immediately left. Naturally, no trace of number 58 was found. Wilson almost searched the nearby territory, but there was no trace of it. So he dispatched his subordinates to look for some guys with sensitive noses to see if they could find the existence of that person. After all, the Walt group gave him a death order. If he can't find the 58 who escaped from the laboratory, then he shouldn't be the security manager anymore. Seeing the person in charge, Nelson immediately raised 2 fingers and said, "Looking for someone, $2,000. The superheroes under the Water Group's contract are all based on whether their image and abilities match Water's wishes, and whether they are packaged. But there are many superhumans who don't do well, and Nelson is also one of them because he has been sucking on new things, so he has been short of money recently." Wilson glanced at him without saying much and asked his subordinates to take out the clothes previously worn by Experiment 58. In his 20s, an adult male. Nelson shrugged his dog nose, sniffed the clothes in his hand, and looked at Wilson. Wilson nodded satisfied and said, "Find this person and give you $4,000. End of this chapter.